Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner at Douglas Jackson, a high-end retained search consultancy exclusively focused on customer-centric businesses delivering high-performance, impactful, diverse leadership. I'm delighted today to be joined by Peter Massey. Many of you know Peter from Bud. He's also set up and runs the Chief Customer Officer Forum, and we met 10 plus years ago now. Peter founded Bud back in 2001. And this is his fourth successful business, and he spends he's spent many of the last 20 years working with leaders and businesses to stop doing dumb things to their people and their customers. So he's here today as an entrepreneur to share his experience and his stories with you, and he'll be sharing those thoughts and ideas around the development and delivery of a compelling employee value proposition and how that will help you attract and retain top talent. So we will have Q&A opportunities throughout the session. Please do post in the chat box, raise your hand, and if you want to get involved, feel free to have your cameras on throughout and unmute. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Peter. Peter, thank you.
In the sense that
sorry, Peter.
It's all right. I feel a bit like a fraud here because I'm in no way any sort of HR people kind of qualified in that sense, but having sort of started and run 4 businesses, the subject itself is very close to my heart in terms of the way in which you attract talent and bring it on. And I think I was doing some thinking about this for Michelle. I put a few slides together just to get my thoughts in order. And it's quite difficult to work out where your own belief about employees and about the propositions you put to employees come from. But one of the things that's very clear is when you're starting businesses and when you're growing businesses, the attraction of the talent and the keeping that talent is absolutely essential to what you do. So it was very interesting then to try and analyze where did that come from. I found 2 or 3 things that I thought were very significant, which I'm going to share with you, and we can discuss those in a little while. I'll just kick on into the slides for a second, and I'll switch those off so we can discuss. Now let's see if I can share screen appropriately. Here we go. Right, hopefully you've got a quick slide up there. It says, money is a demotivator unless you haven't got enough. And I wanted to put this up here. It's partly that kind of, where does my motivation come from? And it's that early in my career, I was working in sales. There was lots of commission, that kind of stuff, sales management, and then you end up running the commission schemes. And what you realized is that using money, as in that company did, it used money to quite a high degree as a motivator, that actually what you ended up doing was 9 times out of 10, you ended up demotivating people. So if the lever that you were pulling was people get more money for doing better, getting better results, what inevitably ended up is that you had a lot of people who weren't receiving that money, who felt demotivated by it, and a lot of people who received money because they were very successful, who were no longer motivated by money. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on about why that's so. But I strongly believe that getting lost in money as the motivation for attracting people and money as the motivation for keeping people is a bit of a dead end. And I'm going to explain that in a little while. I think the other thing from my early career is me looking very green or very young anyway, is that you learn very early that in a team, every winner can create losers if you're not careful. If the culture of the organization is one that only celebrates the winners, then you can create this difficulty where by having people, there are naturally people who win all the time. Not naturally is perhaps an unfair word. You know, some people are good at the games that we play, and consequently other people who are maybe your stalwarts, your people you're really require in the team, can feel like the losers if you're not careful. But that's all about the way it's treated. And the other factor I thought about when I was looking at this in my early career was that my motivation profile, I discovered, is very high on relationships. And this came to me through some work I did with London Business School and some of the benchmarking they did. I'm going to share some of that work with you on motivation profiles, because I think that's very important to the way in which we then create employee propositions. Where at the end of the day, we're trying to create propositions that help people. So I'm here today really as a serial entrepreneur. This is not the kind of work that we do for a living, if you know what I mean. It's not something in that sense. It's purely from the businesses that I've built. Attracting and keeping talent's absolutely essential to it. And as I say, this is very personal to me because the way in which we treat our employees is absolutely essential to the way I run my businesses, but also to the passion I have about when I'm working with other businesses as well. So I'm just going to pose this question of what is an employee proposition, and I'm going to stop sharing and just pass this around for a little while, and then I'll show a couple of definitions of what that's like out in the real world. So does anybody kick off first of all what they see an employee proposition as being? What do you think an employee proposition is in your experience?
I can have a stab, Peter. Hi, can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah, all good.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent stuff. We've just done a piece of work on EVP, employee value proposition, and I guess it's effectively what is it that your business stands for that would attract and enable you to hire and then retain the right employees for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
absolutely. Hang on, anybody else want to chip in?
Well, just an idea is that by the end of the day, you can see what you've done. You can see that in our case, mostly it helped someone. We probably rescued someone out of a really problematic situation. So at least we have the benefit that we know what we're doing is good for others, is good also then for myself. It's probably good for the society.
Cool, yeah, good stuff. Francis, do you want to chip one in? Francis smiled at me earlier on. That's deadly. Don't smile at me because otherwise you get volunteer.
Sorry, just muting. I mean, I think from my perspective, Darren's obviously covered the kind of the key. You know, it's actually it's the offer, really, isn't it? It's the offer for employees, and it's getting that right based on kind of expectations. And I think a lot of the challenge we're seeing much of now is that some of those expectations have changed naturally through the pandemic. So, you know, the pressure that's creating and us we're also doing some thinking around what our offer is. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Offer is a common word used in this area because marketing propositions refer often to the offer that the company makes to its customers. And this is, as Darren explained very eloquently, this is effectively what's the offer you've got for your employees. Damien, did you want to chip in there?
I was going to say, I do agree with Darren, actually, totally, which is not unexpected. We tend to. That's the environment to create not necessarily financial, but the overall.
That's Damien's end, is it? Not mine.
The final one is the freedom to the individual. So kind of what they're going to feel in terms of their three things at that level, I think the offer should contain.
Yeah.
You can't hear me.
We lost quite a lot of that, Damien. But we got the last bit there. Yeah. Bring it in the chat. That would be really good. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily very complicated, but if I share my screen again on here, let's see. Here's a definition I got off that very useful source, Wikipedia, which is very similar to the one that Darren was making. I think one of the points I would make is that you've got to look at propositions perhaps the other way around, the way this first paragraph is written. You know, an EVP is one of the ways companies attract the skills and employees they desire. I think your start point is to look at it the other way around and say, what is it that the employees want that you want to employ? Because if you look at the profile of people that you're dealing with, you can start off and waste an awful lot of time and effort by thinking about what you want rather than what they want. And I think that's pretty fundamental in any kind of customer experience, be it employee experience, external customer, or whatever. So the start point needs to be that way around. And obviously, you know, we've covered some of the words in here and how it works. Again, I don't necessarily think it needs to be at a cheaper cost. You know, money is not necessarily the relevant point in a proposition, but it is part of the proposition. And as I say, my deep belief is that if you pay too little, you can demotivate people. If you pay too much, you can waste a lot of money, because it's not necessarily the thing that's going to motivate people to stay or motivate people to perform. Once you've got beyond a certain point. So let me just share them with you, a couple of war stories about the stuff that I was doing in my businesses, which I think, again, this took me a little bit of scratching my head to sort of think through what is it that we were doing that was working so well. Because we had, there were two companies before I did Bud, one called Aspen, one called Round, where we had very high success rates in the business sense before I sold those businesses. And also in the retention sense, we got very good people and we retained almost all of them. So by retain, I mean over a period of 3 or 4 years, those teams were growing. So let's have a quick look then. Oh yeah, I just forgot. One of the things I wrote this after I'd finished doing my own research into my own head of what we were doing. And I think this quote, which I got from talking to some of the people that used to work for me, that this might be an interesting definition that I would use today. Help each person change their life for the better in the way they want to. And Michelle, we were talking about this before we came on the call, weren't we? Is that I think this is one of the motivators really around a lot of people who help it across the industry. So a quick word around Aspen. This is kind of Aspen on the ski slopes in Aspen, because the standing joke was always that one day Pete's going to take us skiing in Aspen, Colorado. And the week before we sold the business, we took a whole bunch of people and their wives up to Aspen, about 25, 30 people, and had a right old time. The one on the bottom left is, I think, about the 10th reunion, and the one on the bottom right was the 30th reunion. And it's a group of people who are still very close and very tight with each other over time. I think, why was that business successful in the sense of its proposition to people? There were some fundamentals, and I'm going to share them with you. So first off, we believe very much in development. So our primary proposition to people was that we would help them take responsibility for their own development, and we would be working very hard with them to develop them as fast as we could. And I'll show you a couple of ways we did that. Now, we had this phrase called eminently employable. It was the internal jargon that said, your job is to make yourself eminently employable. And in fact, we had visibility of headhunt calls. So if you were eminently employable, you were going to be visible in what was a very competitive market for these talented people. And they were going to get headhunted anyway, whether we made them visible or not. But the point was to get openness around the conversation about how eminently employable are you. So a headhunt call from New Zealand would win the prize, round of beers for getting a headhunt call from the furthest point on the planet, or the headhunt call for the highest figure, or whatever it might be. We'd get that into the open. But the fundamental behind it was the gift of time for development, that we expected people to spend 20% of their time on developing themselves. Now, whether that was in team meetings or in personal development, whether it was in work or out of work, we were specific about the 20%. Now, we never really had to measure it. We could, because we had a lot of people on timesheets and things like that. We didn't have to measure it. All we had to do is to enforce the fact that it was a valuable thing to do and demonstrate it when the pressure was on. So when the pressure was on, we wouldn't let that time be sacrificed. What are the fundamentals? Because we developed this idea before Google was even around. But one of the fundamentals that brought this to my attention was talking to people in the military. And the military guys in training talk about 99% training, 1% activity. And it makes you think, well, okay, where's the balance then between, a typical organization perhaps does 95% activity, 5% training. Where's the balance between those two? And I never found an economic problem with donating that 20%. And I never found we had to push people too hard on it, because they were always very responsible about getting their work done. They were not always responsible to themselves in committing the time to their own development. So we could beat people up on their development time and they would love it, because it was always about them and about their development. But that was the profile of people that we had. The reason we understood something about these profiles is I did some work with London Business School. There was a very good guy, John Hunt, and his sidekick, Rob Goffey. John Hunt was like, he had a column in the FT, and he was, very well known in organisational behaviour. And when I was on one of the courses at LBS, they taught us about this motivation profile, which I mentioned before. And what you were able to do is, through a whole series of questionnaires and things, was to work out what the profiles were. And LBS had a big database of 10,000 of people who'd been through this process. And so what we discovered is that the profile of most of the people we had was in this recognition, relationships, autonomy, and results. And there are other words for these lines, but recognition, you could put, glory, actors are very high on recognition, that kind of thing. Relationships, team, that kind of team behavior stuff. Autonomy, also creativity, the space to operate in. And results, delivery, getting stuff done in that area. And that was our main profile. We were pretty low on structure for the most part, and pretty low on reward, although not everybody, because everybody's profile is different. But what we saw is the majority were in those green areas. Now, structure was quite interesting because we had quite a lot of structure in the business. We had ISO 9000 and whatever they are processes. But the processes we used predominantly to try and take away a lot of the stuff that got in the way of scaling the business. But there was still a lot of autonomy about the way that we used them. But by understanding the profile of our people, we were able to think about the way we communicated with each other, the way that we rewarded. And with that profile, we were able to bring in things like a benefits cafe. So you could choose whether you wanted the money that was in a pot to be put into your pension, you wanted it to be this, that, and the other, wherever it might be. Famously, one of the guys in the office was a train spotter, and we could never call him a train spotter because he was only interested in one particular engine. And whenever that engine went anywhere around the country, he got a phone call to say, it's moving from X to Y, do you want to come on it? And so his benefits was, he said, no, I don't want any of the bonuses, I don't want the pension, I don't want this and that. I want the ability to get off my chair when the phone rings and go get on that train. And that's what he had. So that was, appealing to a different profile than money and structure. Now, when you do the analysis, if your people have got much more focus on structure, a lot of people do, they like to understand exactly where they stand there, they like to understand the way the job is, they like things described well, they like to be not thrown around in terms of what's going on, then that profile, that's going to be a different set of things you would do for them. The reward profile is interesting because in LBS's data, there was only about 1/6 of people that were really reward motivated. And the reward mechanism, again, after it's reached a threshold, after you're not worrying about money, then the money above that can be nice, but quite often it's there as a recognition rather than anything else. It's there as a sign that you've delivered, but it's not necessarily motivating them fundamentally in terms of the way that it works. And I do hear over the last year, when we've had this phrase of, the war for talent, I've heard of a lot of companies throwing a lot of money at people. And quite often what that's about is fairness. It's about the relationships and the recognition. I can't put the money up for these new people coming in unless I put the money up for the people who are already there. I can't I can't create problems with the money. It's not actually about using the money as a reward for the individual concerned. So I think that's where, don't have any answers to that, but I think we have to think about that really hardly. Sorry, really thoroughly. Okay, so that was one part of the model. The other part was another guy at London Business School, John Moorcroft, who was a specialist in systems design, organisational systems. The slide on the bit on the right is us designing call centre models and how they work and all this kind of thing. Hugely complex amounts of thinking went into it. But what distilled from working with these guys was that we worked out a way to have a double organisation. So we had teams where in the little purple rings up there, we've got development, mentoring, and management of time, which was a more traditional team. You were in a team, you had a team leader, and you sat down to do your mentoring with them. The development plan was done with them, etc., etc. So all of that was in one hierarchy, and you could be promoted to a team leader. You could be given responsibilities to in that sphere. The other sphere was in the projects that we did, was around 3 roles that we had. You could be a lead player, so you could lead a project. You could be the delivery guys on the project, so you reported to the lead, and the leader is responsible for your development on the project, as well as getting the work done. And the other role was the review role, and the review role was somebody who was not on the project and who had a responsibility to review the quality of the work from time to time. And what we found we were able to do was, by putting junior people into project review and project lead roles and reversing the hierarchies, we were able to give people very strong development opportunities and keep very experienced people on their toes. So this again was very specific to our motivation profiles, because we had a lot of people who were not motivated by structure. So they could understand and they could work with that kind of ambiguity that was in being involved in 2 hierarchies at the same time. And they could deal with that ambiguity of, I'm much more experienced than them, so why are they telling me what to do? But that gave us some very fast turbocharging mechanisms, because you can imagine when you've got junior people in project lead and project review roles, that they are really on their toes. And if you've got the right supportive culture, the people who are more experienced working in the project will look after them just as much as if they were the project lead. So it was this kind of deliberate design of the way the organization worked that gave us a different proposition. So you can imagine when we were selling this to people we're recruiting, so our offer to somebody we're recruiting, it takes a little bit of explaining, and that in itself sorts out those that really like structure versus those who've got those other profiles. And when you're actually in it, though, it felt fundamentally really rewarding. We did a later version of that, which I'm going to skip for now because it just confused things. But this was a couple of the quotes I got last week from people who worked in these organizations. I'm just going to pause and let you read them for a second. So fundamentally, if I go back then to my personal motivation as the founder was one around, I'm very highly motivated on team. I'm creating structures in the way that my offer works that allow my motivation to be met, but also is going to appeal to a certain profile of people. It's not going to appeal to everybody. And so I think this is quite important when we're discussing the propositions. You've got to look at who are your leaders, what are their motivations, who are the people you're trying to attract, what are their motivations, and then you've got to do some really research perhaps first, because so many of these models have been invented somewhere else, and then from there actually trying to work hard on what will fit the bill. So let me kill slides. Said I'd only do 10 minutes on slides. Sorry, I got carried away. So what can I take some reactions from that?
Yeah, hi Peter. This is so I'm just trying to put my camera on as well.
Hi James.
Hey, sorry. And I'm not I've got two cameras. I'm not looking at the right one. There we go. You're there. And I'm looking at that. But it was quite interesting, I think, that last point as well, because regarding changing profiles there as well, effectively in terms of the division of labour as well, which I think is something that not really, I've not really thought of previously in way of structuring structure teams. I think that's quite innovative way of doing that and effectively managing your team towards where they really bring added value. And it's something that I think I really need to look forward to into for some of my teams. That's really interesting.
Thank you. Has anybody else got multiple structures? I mean, it's quite common in EMEA-based organisations to have multiple bosses, for example, within a region or within a product zone at the same time. And some people find that horrible. Some people love it,
I think one of the things that we've got currently is that we've got situations where we've got hierarchical and functional reporting structures. At the moment, I find it demotivating. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective. For a colleague, I think it's demotivating and quite confusing. So I think that this is something which we could really add into the mix there, which I think would bring a far more rewarding working structure rather than just creating extra complexity, which is what I think we're doing at the moment, and demotivating.
Yeah. So you saw me skip a slide there, which I thought, no, that's going to confuse. Because again, unless you're on the inside of an organization design, things can get complicated very quickly. And so you've got to be very clear about the culture of the organization and the kind of people that you've got and that you want to see whether that fits or not. Well, especially if this multiple structure in our situation here in Nuremberg, Germany, since about 2.5 years, some of the functionalities has moved directly to managers then in the UK structure. And they are facing the problem that to be locally present, it's not that easy. So we come to a solution that you have divided it between some kind of functional things, and the other one is more the personal related thing that we have to be present. And then we got COVID and all the things around. Nowadays, we just got aware, probably other companies some bit earlier, that using the right tools, you can arrange a team meeting within seconds, integrating persons all over the world as long they are just up and awake. This wasn't even possible on the old mechanism that you said, okay, we go to this room, let's meet together. And since that time, for me and for myself, it was a really good experience to see those colleagues all over the world, mainly, of course, from my position I was in the UK also, not only by mail or maybe by telephone, was much more rare, typically mail, just to see them. I mean, it's not a real personal thing, but okay, you have the screen, you can see this person, and it's game changing. So I think, yes, I think organizing teams is just got much more easier. Yeah, so Gunther, I'd agree with you. I think the tools now allow you to form and unform teams much more quickly. But I still think there's a lot to be said for the clarity of the way in which those teams function and the roles that people take within them. I think one of the test questions for us, particularly the business that I skipped the slide on, was that we were 6 people in a startup that moved to 30 people overnight, that was built for 300. And we spent a lot of the time in the early stages of testing our proposition, because we knew we had to recruit very quickly. So the test that we had was, could we do the lift conversation? So this is what the Americans call the elevator pitch for why work at this place. Because we were used to practicing that for what's the elevator pitch for when we're trying to sell something, what's the elevator pitch when we're trying to sell to a person. And I think that's a useful test question, because it's what's the essence of your offer. in that sort of way. Has anybody got an elevator pitch for their organisation they can share with us, even if you just made it up?
We use Peter, and it came out of the customer side of the business and marketing. But for the employee proposition, can you express it in what was the 140 characters for a tweet? So the tweet test, and that's been really so. Our purpose of Aviva is here today for a better tomorrow. So that's the tweet. We then need, people that are able to actually apply themselves to that purpose in terms of help individuals or customers through, what are quite difficult circumstances, so they have that better tomorrow.
Yeah, interesting.
Peter, Chris Haggis has a question for you as well.
Wow.
Yeah, hi there. Hello, thanks.
Hiya.
Thanks, Joe. Hello, Peter. Can you? My video not coming on?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, it is good. Okay, great. Yeah, my question is sort of more current right now, right here. I guess those of you running any sort of large technical teams, software developers, call center people, that's what we do. We've got lots and lots of call center engineers, call center technology engineers. And there is a massive demand right now for technical people. It's incredible, and I've been in this industry a long time, and it's always been kind of easy to get jobs and easy to get to move around within the call center technology industry. But now it's just gone ballistic, and especially software development as well. So while there's various things long term, and absolutely, you can build EVPs, you can kind of do various things to make sure you motivate people the right way, and it's not about the money. Right here, right now, it is about the money. I feel it really is about the money, because it's there's significant amounts of money being offered on the table to move. So what would you is there any advice that's got any like short term now, bang? Because the other problem here is costs are going up and up. It hasn't reached the consumers yet, right? So, our base is getting more expensive, etc. People get more expensive, but we can only put our prices up on the renewal or the next time we sell something, or an annual cycle, or a 3-year cycle, or whatever. So, for me to maintain the margins that we need, to stay in the business, etc. That's a timely thing. That could take us another 2 years to get to that. So if you're kind of constantly trying to battle with the cost rises, what do? Do you just kind of go with it and say, okay, we've got to find more money from somewhere, or any short-term wins? Anyone's got any ideas to sort of plug the gap? I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've got a couple of ideas, but let me pause and offer it round first. Does anybody want to chip in with what they've been doing? It's a very common set of circumstances, isn't it, Chris? So these are people perhaps on salaries of what? 25, 40 as engineers on the phone? Or?
Now, yeah, but we're European, so we've got salaries are different, obviously, in different countries. Yeah. But I think you are that's the sort of region.
Yeah. So the people to whom extra money is really useful, rather than somebody who's very highly paid already. Yeah. Cool. Good. Anybody? Any suggestions they want to kick in?
Sue's put something in the chat box. Eon next as is start your feel good career and get that. Oh, is that something else? Oh, sorry, that's the elevator pitch. Apologies.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think what I've seen, Chris, I'll chip in a couple of ideas if anybody else has tried this, is that one of the things is about the openness of conversations and the visibility of the conversations, so that everybody knows that's the market now. So everybody knows there are headhunt calls going around, and everybody knows that probably everybody's looking. The surveys say that 50% of people in Australia seriously went and looked for another job last year. Yeah. So, how can you promote openness of that conversation that says this is really what's happening? These are the salaries that are around. What is the open conversation we have with the people who are at risk, and what is the open conversation we have in the boardroom? And I think the more visible those conversations are, the more chance you stand of retaining the people who fit what's the word, who enjoy that and taking part in an honest conversation about it. Some people are going to be, you know, need that extra money or be money motivated or wherever it is, they're going to go. So there's almost like a profiling to do by using whatever profile you like, but a profiling of the people and seeing, well, where's our at risk. Certainly, even before this last year or two, so a lot of organizations who had profiles of people in the organization and their expectation of the risk of leaving. I'm not quite sure what the HR legal status of all that is. And the way that works, because I saw that in the States and it may be different over here. But if you can get the openness of the conversation, you've got some risk profiles and you know specifically who to talk to, the most at risk people, you can do a little bit more motivation profiling on them and see if there are other levers you can pull with those individuals. So a bit like my story about the guy who likes trains, he really did need some more money, but at the end of the day, his key motivation we could fulfill without it costing us very much, you know, some disturbance, but that's all.
Yeah, I guess my thinking is that, you know, this is, you know, while some people, yeah, it's all about other aspects and not about the money, because of the demand, the price, you know, the costs are going up, and it's having an open conversation with our customers and saying, you know, this is coming, you just haven't seen it yet, right? You just haven't, it hasn't reached you. You know, saying, well, look, this is coming. You like our engineers, you like our people. We want you to be aware that, you know, things are going to get more expensive, and I just don't think it's reached that level yet. I think we're sort of 6 months away.
I would also just say, Peter, if you don't mind, I mean, from Chris's perspective, I think, you know, businesses at the moment, if I were them, the advice that I would give to a lot of our clients is start re-recruiting everyone that works for you right now. So have individual one-to-one conversations, you know, as they are pretending or, you know, on the assumption that they're a brand new employee, because things have changed and what motivated or you think motivates them may well very much have changed. And then you can get this profile of what's motivating people and why people are loyal to you. And also the second thing is look at your outreach. I mean, I've been in recruitment. I'm a headhunter. I've been in search for, you know, over 20 years. And a lot of recruitment is rubbish, frankly. And the initial attempt at trying to attract people is awful. And so it is about engagement, and you need to spend time on how you reach out to new people and sort of stop offering them a job and start entering a conversation about them and what's important to them and what their future looks like. So you might not be able to attract someone today, but you might attract someone in 3 months or in 6 months or in 12 months. And it's the long-term employment attraction strategy rather than I must fill this role now. And that would be some advice that I would give to anyone in that situation.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard, you wanted to chip in?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the re-recruiting resets super important in the same way that we kind of espouse delivering a personalized customer experience. I think we now need to deliver a personalized employee experience. And with the whole hybrid working, that's thrown everything up in the air. So having a conversation with everyone and understanding how you can make their lives better, both in work and outside of work, I think will help retain them, and you know, they'll think twice about going somewhere else where perhaps there are more restrictions.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. That when we were recruiting, what we would do is the first interview would always be 50-50. And it's something that most people, to your point, Michelle, most recruitment's crap. The experience is usually very one-sided. And that can be the same with your internal re-recruitment or your discussion about their profile. It's got to be a 50-50 discussion to understand what's on offer, what could be on offer versus what do people actually want. And if you can get that 50-50 going, then I think there's a lot more success. And I say this, one of my daughters has just been through this process of being re-recruited. She's had 3 pay rises this year. And fundamentally, that was because she was below the living wage in London, if you like. And unless they addressed that, she was never going to be able to stay. Having addressed it, she's now much more able to focus on the other pieces of what's good about that company rather than worrying about, what else is there. So that's more at that kind of, if you paid 25 grand, the money really does matter. But what she really remembers is not the pay rises. She remembers that somebody finally sat down and listened to her. And that's the difference, I think.
Yeah, I work for a non-profit, and so salaries are always really challenging for us. And actually, most people's motivations to come and work at Hope for Justice are not because we're offering huge salaries, because we just can't. But as a board, we have made a conscious decision to say we want to pitch ourselves middle of the road in terms of salary compared with other NGOs. But on terms of benefits, we want to be at the top. So our attraction model is looking at things which, even giving things like more days holiday, annual leave than other NGOs do. You could say, well, there's a cost to that, but actually you have to look at, particularly now with hybrid working, there's a real productivity issue with people sitting at their desks, not having that homework transition. By actually giving them the opportunity to take more annual leave is boosting our productivity and boosting people's responsiveness and motivation in their work, because actually they feel more valued, because we're saying we value you and we value your time, whereas our hands are tied quite often on the funding and the salary position.
Yeah, really good point, Elaine. And it's very interesting if you look at what does it take to recruit volunteers and what does it take to retain volunteers. Did a big piece of work with the National Trust a couple of years ago, which was absolutely fascinating, because it's 65,000 volunteers. And actually the attitudes towards volunteers in the people who were managing them was quite interesting. And there was a fundamental actually that was there that people were after when they were volunteering, and that visitors were looking for when they came, and what a lot of the staff who worked for the National Trust were all of them were interested in happiness as a core subject. Yet it was not on anybody's agenda to talk about that kind of stuff, because it's all a bit sort of Daily Mail headline thing, you know, National Trust gets into happiness. But it nevertheless, that came out of actually talking to people and finding out what did they really want. So if you look at how would you get a volunteer to join your organisation, how would you get somebody to work for free? Or as we used to do, how would you get somebody to take a pay cut before they joined you? We always used to have the discussion about pay cut. They could make up the salary in no end 6 months later, but we were very clear that the job was not about the money. They had to be motivated by the development profile. But again, this is always back to what's your leadership, what's your profile, therefore what's your system that pulls together this proposition and retention. Great points, Elaine. Anybody else? Jasmine and Jodie, Gareth, Branka, Madeline, Stephanie, Sarah? Just come off mute if you've got something you'd like to chip in. Yeah, Stephanie. You're still on mute, I think. Can you hear Michelle?
No, I don't think Stephanie's sound is working. Stephanie, if you want to pop it in the chat box, we can read that out.
Cool, thank you. Anybody else want to chip in? No. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to cover today. I think it's a huge subject, and certainly in our client base, the sort of war on talent is very predominant in what's going on. I just think the key thing is no different to what it was pre-COVID or pre-wars on talent or anything else. And that's if you want to get the most out of people, you've got to spend time with them, you've got to invest time in them. And that's got to be built into the system of management that you use, because you can't do that on your own. You've got to have all sorts of people believing in the same things. And that's, to me, the motivation profiles are fundamental, but it doesn't have to start from there. So, Michelle, back to you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Peter. And I think, you know, just to concur with you, really, I mean, these points like the trust, the responsibility, accountability and the development, again, you know, I reach out to people all the time to find their motivations to leave. And it is very little, it's not very often about the money. Money is important, but there's always another reason why someone ultimately will leave the business. And as I said earlier, I think tapping into that and sort of creating these environments where people really sort of thrive and flourish and feel valued and listened to is critical, because especially with us all being at home, you know, for so long, there are so many people who feel unloved regardless of you know, what we've done. Sort of the Teams, the Zoom atmosphere, it can't work forever, can it? You know, we need to put our arms around people and sort of do more than just have a coffee break or a game on Teams and Zoom. And I think as people come back to the office, you know, it's going to be a big opportunity for businesses that want to do it, really stand out, differentiate yourself and be brave. But you know, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much. This is such an exciting and sort of passionate subject for so many, and it'll be interesting to see how many businesses do well at this over the next sort of 12 months, I think. So I mean, thank you everyone for joining and giving up your hour today. We'll send the recording out. I've got the slides as well. If you want them, just drop us a note. Obviously, you can contact Peter directly on LinkedIn and we can share his details. And myself, you've got my contact details as well.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Oh, Richard just asked, anyone considering a 4-day week that a few employers are trying? So, I mean, you can answer that if you like.
Yeah.
The late question. Don't let me interrupt leaving.
Richard, we do what's called compressed hours, but we've been very clear through our employee forums and unions that that's the way that people can be more flexible rather than actually a formal, 4-day week.
Okay.
Yeah. If you, Richard, if you look up Bob Stella on LinkedIn, and Bob works a 4-day week and has been doing now for 3 or 4 years. And there's various conversations in his thread about it and links to other organizations. He often flags them up when they go for it.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Fabulous. Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
Take care.
bye then.
Bye-bye.